And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Marie was born to an unmarried African mother who lives illegally in Canada. Her mother performs housework every day in order to pay the rent, and then if any money is left over, to buy a little food. Marie went to school for a short while, but when her mother stopped her for fear of being arrested. Omar was only 4 months old when he suffered bouts of severe fever that left his legs badly developed. Now aged 15, he is handicapped and moves around on a wooden board on wheels that he made himself. He goes to school, but none of the other children want to play with him. These stories and more are contained in this game, Kimaloe. This game is designed by GameWorks, who brought us the very wonderful Jamaica, and it's also produced by a organization in Switzerland called the Terre des Hommes, or TDH for short, and basically they're an organization to help children who need help all over the world. Well, that makes this game an ideal one for educational purposes, and I think that's what they meant it for. Is it a good game? Well, let's take a look at how the game works, and then I'll let you know what I think. So here's the board set up. There are many different children included on cards in the course of the game, and 5 of them are randomly set up along with a scoring track. Now on each player's scoring track, they have 2 scoring markers. They have a large scoring marker, the adult, and the child scoring marker. Whenever they score big points, they move the bigger pawn, and whenever they score little points, they move the small pawn. But one of the unique features of this game is that the pawns can be at most 3 spaces apart. So if, for example, this is the way the 2 pawns are, and I score some big points, I don't get any because he can't leave more than 3 spaces from the other pawn. On a player's turn, they roll a 6-sided die. This die has the faces 1, 2, or 3 on it. They roll the die, and they move their truck that far in a clockwise direction. Players will have cards in their hand from their own personalized deck. Each player has their own deck, and while it shows the number on the back, on the front it shows different pictures. If when they stop at a certain child, and you have something that helps that child, for example, this child needs a friend, and so I happen to have a card that matches that, I can place that card on the friend face down. Taking care of that problem is now eliminated. Now, when the last problem on someone is eliminated, for example, let's say the white player plays or the black player plays a card there. At this point, this child's problems have been taken care of. And we count up the points. Gray here has 4 points and black has 3 points. Now, because of that, let's take a closer look at the board here. Black has 3 points and gray has 4 points. Because gray has the most points, the points that he scores are all big points. Black doesn't have the most points, so any points he scores are the fewest points. So while you want to have a majority, many of the times, just as much of the time, you don't want to have a majority. Also, depending on where you move your truck, each spot has a special ability. This one gives you 3 points that you can split between your people that you're moving. This one lets you play pink cards on other zones. This one lets you redraw your hand back up to 7 cards. This one lets you play yellow cards in other zones. This one gives you a special card, which you can use later on for certain special abilities. And this one lets you play blue cards in other locations. Not only this, your truck has this cube on it. When you move, you can drop the cube off to move forward an extra space or to move 1 less space than what you rolled, which gives you a little bit more control over your movement. If you don't have the cube, you can't do that, but if you land in a spot with a cube and you're empty, you can put the cube on board. Also, players have a choice of skipping their turn and drawing 1, 2, or 3 cards and adding them to their hand. When a child is finished, as this child is finished, they are taken off the board, and a new child is pulled from the ranks and added. And this continues until one player manages to get one of their pawns to the end here, again, following the rule that the pawns can never be more than 3 spaces apart. There's some good ideas in this game. The most notable is the one where you have to keep the 2 pawns close enough together, and that's an interesting thing. It's thematic that the child can't stray too far from its parents. And in a sense, the game itself is thematic. You're helping children out. Now, to some folks, I guess the theme is going to come across maybe a little preachy, and it certainly is biased. But I mean, who's going to argue against helping children? At the same time, there's a few odd things. For example, if I have that load in my truck, am I dropping it off to ignore the kid here, and I'm going to go help some other kid? I guess you could argue and say the other child needs the benefits more. And, why when I land on one continent can I play cards on another continent? But, these things are things that can be, it's a good discussion game. And as an educational game, I'm going to give this a very high thumbs up. I think it's very useful in that regard. As a game itself, it's interesting because it's kind of hard to know how well to do. I mean, you can drop cards off in a spot and hope that you have the majority there so you get the big points, or in another spot and hope that you don't have the majority, and you can deliberately set things up to make sure another player doesn't score points. So it can be very interactive, but at the same time, the game can be played very casually. There's a randomness in the cards that you draw from your deck. Everyone has the same cards in their deck, but, when do you get them, and what's needed on the board, and what number do you roll on a die? It's fairly light, but there's also some strategy in when to play cards, where to play them, and where to move your truck. I would say in strategic terms, it's a middleweight game, or maybe even a little bit less than that. Very light, very much similar to their previous offering, Jamaica. So I like the game. I don't love it because I don't know, there's just something about it that feels almost too casual. But it does work well with children and with adults and is a good family game.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.